cooler for each culvert?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks all of you for attending our Bolton budget information session tonight. A few of us had gotten together earlier in the year just to sort of think about how we could maybe get a little more out front of town meeting on the budget and some of the other questions that come up anytime we're getting a run up to town meeting. One thing we did, if you get the Bolton Independent, you might have noticed that for the last 4 weeks we've had a weekly column explaining a different segment of the budget. We did debt, tax rate, snow and ice, and free cash, and E&D from the school department. Again, to try to give people a little bit more of a foundation for what we later discuss at town meeting, and to help make it as an informed discussion as possible. So this is sort of the last piece of that, an opportunity for people to ask questions. This is being broadcast live on Bolton Access TV, and I'm sure will be replayed throughout the week leading up to town meeting. We've got with us to sort of go over the major elements of the budget tonight, Brad Cote, who's the chairman of the advisory committee, and Lorraine Romasco, who is the chairman of the Neshoba Regional School Committee. And littered throughout the overflowing audience, we have a number of local officials who are here to also answer questions. Harold Brown from Public Works, our new police chief, congratulations Bumper, is here to address any questions on the police. Don Lowe, town administrator, is here. So is Mark Sprague from the Board of Selectmen. Stan Wysocki from the Board of Selectmen, and various others here to help. So I'm going to turn it over first to Brad and then to Lorraine to sort of walk through the overview of the budgets, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. And if you're watching this at home and you have a question, you better get over here and answer it, because there's no live telephone line open.
All right,
Brad?
thank you, Richard. So what I thought I'd do is just give you a sense of how this all gets started. So, you know, it's at this point, you know, it's back in November or so, and I generally get an email or a phone call from Don, and he gets my perspective. He's had some communication with the selectmen on, you know, what your thoughts are, where things are with the budget, and you know, from there, you know, Don makes the call, and the edict generally goes out to all the department heads on, you know, what they're looking for from a town budget perspective. And so this is, I'm sure all the department heads will chime in that they are, you know, sick and tired of hearing a level funded budget, but this year again was that request out to the department heads. And so the department heads put together their various budgets. That gets submitted to Don and to the accounting department. Everything gets formulated, and then advisory starts meeting with the various departments going over the budget. So if you do not have a handout, there's handouts over on the table over there. And what I have for you is the advisory statement that also will be in the warrant, along with the final budget worksheet that is predominantly in the warrant as well. It is also listed on the website under the selectmen. It's listed under the advisory group as well, and at least it's, Don, is it under yours, or it's in one other area, at least one other area, so it's on the website as well. You know, very similar, for those of you who have been following this over the years, you know, this year in a way was really, you know, like no other. I mean, as looking through the advisory statement, you know, really just going down the revenue table, taking a look at the various sources of funding where the town can, you know, collect money, and looking at that relative to the previous year, you know, that has increased slightly, but you'll also notice, you know, a fairly healthy amount of negatives, which is in reality, I mean, on the revenue side, we'd like to see the numbers more positive. With a grain of salt, given the fact that predominantly the biggest source of revenue is really all of us in our taxes off of in our houses. So from the revenue side, that's the picture there. On expenses, we again, the various departments put forth their budget, and an awful lot of them, did their very best to maintain that, ask of a level fund. But there were certain areas where that has gone over, and rightly so. We asked them to explain the reasoning, and they do. A couple of big drivers, what you're gonna see this year versus other years is there's a tremendous amount of capital projects going on this year. And that is really a function of just a fairly healthy amount of deferred maintenance that the town has put off. We have a capital planning group that puts forth a 5-year projection. The problem is that it varies quite wildly. We have for this year, and where you can find to get a sense, for those of you who didn't bring your warrant, in the budget sheet, if you go to the very last page, you'll get, on page 25, you'll get a sense of the various warrant articles. Wherever possible, we use free cash, right? So free cash is essentially our savings account. We don't want to drain it down to zero. It's a function of anything excess from the previous year. And we first want to utilize that wherever possible, because essentially what it is also saying is that we collected more taxes than we really needed to. In the ideal world, it would be great to come out with a zero, but we're working with a time lag here. So we have this amount of free cash that comes in. And advisory selectmen also get together to say, hey, when we're all finished with this budget, we want to have a little bit left so as to start the next year. So the delta of that is what you can see there. And we look through the various articles, requests for funding to utilize those dollars. However, this year, there was significantly more requests than we could take care of by way of free cash, which, it is what it is. Again, we've been able to move things up, looking at capital planning, seeing a department, seeing if they can delay it a year, or let's move it up. You need it next year, but next year is going to be a really big year, so let's move it to this year. So there's a couple things that we have been doing, but this year there's significantly more. You can see that there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done. So we don't have all the money to take care of it, so we have to, assuming at town meeting it is a yes to appropriate funds for these projects, then we will be borrowing. So at that point, at this point right now, if you don't mind, Rich, I want to deviate a little bit. I've provided a fairly healthy amount. I thought at this point I'd stop and see if there's any questions so far based upon what I've covered. Yes, sir.
Bob Sikansky. On the front page of your budget worksheet, under expenditures, debt service, the estimated number is $1,866,000. The final number is over $2 million. So how did that go up by, what, $140,000?
So I see the 2 million, Bob. Where are you seeing the 1.9? Right on the 1.8?
Estimated.
Yeah, the estimated for 17, which I would take to be the payments due on our outstanding debt, somehow it got bumped up by $140,000.
So that number represents, assuming, if you take a look at the very last sheet here,
Yeah.
right, the big one that is unfolded. So that number assumes that the various warrant articles that are gonna be put forth at town meeting are appropriated, in the affirmative. And so those will then add that on. Additionally,
But I don't think you're gonna pay interest on them in the next 12 months. I understand you're gonna do a borrowing, but I don't think you're gonna pay interest in the next fiscal year. Maybe this is a process question for the town administrator, but, I mean, that's $30 or $140,000 that I'm not sure you actually need.
so it's 104, so 118 of it is the Minuteman, school district coming on.
Okay, but
And then
are they saying that they're gonna send you a bill in fiscal 17?
That's right, Tom?
No, if the Minuteman School Building project is approved, I don't think the first debt service would hit us until about FY19, FY20.
Okay.
I think that since we're doing bands for the borrowing for next year, I would imagine that $140,000 is new payments on the capital improvements for next year, because we'll have very low interest, but we will have some interest on the borrowing, and the terms vary, some of the borrowings only be for probably 5 years, so I would imagine that $140,000 is substantially made up of the capital projects for that.
Well, I know that, yeah, the capital projects, there's 1 million of them, and, yeah, they will immediately start hitting. You can see the breakdown in FY, going across the very top, FY17. Berlin Culvert, 29, Wilder, 20, Town Hall, 35, DPW truck, 15. And then adding up all the other that's already on the books.
It's in excess of $1 million capital projects, 1.1 or so, I believe.
I'm just surprised that when you have a borrowing, that you have to cover it in the following year budget immediately. Because I believe the borrowing occurs in fiscal 17, in which case your first payment would be due in fiscal 18. But if you could just go back and verify that.
Sure.
I guess my question would be, you had some borrowings last year also, but I don't recall, and we didn't have this format, but I don't recall that that you had a payment due in fiscal 16 for the borrowings that were authorized last year.
All right, yeah, I'll take a look. I'll meet up with Donna tomorrow.
Okay.
All right, so any other questions at this point? So I've given you a little explanation on really the process on how it comes to be, where things are from a revenue and expense standpoint. So again, there's an awful lot in the warrant when you take a look at it that the various departments are asking for, whether it's a project, whether it's a piece of equipment, and then we as advisory have determined what makes sense. Do we have enough free cash on hand to utilize that? If not, then we're looking to borrow, and it goes from there. A couple of other things that I guess I want to bring to your attention here. I think collectively, the school, no doubt represents a large portion of this overall budget. And, there was a thorough analysis, Lorraine will explain that. but, you know, they are, you know, their increase is about a 4.4% increase. However, you know, I think the town did a very good job on looking to offset some of that increase by ways that we were able to cut into various departments. So our overall increase from a town is in the neighborhood of 2.9% relative to last year. In terms of, you know, a couple of other things, Bob brought up debt. If you guys do take a look at that very last sheet, the large one that was folded up, you know, I wanted, there was an article in the newspaper, as Richard mentioned. I have a slide and some additional information that will be in PowerPoint when we're all at town meeting. But I also wanted to give you folks a sense of, you know, where we are from a debt perspective. And you can see that, you know, various projects that the town approved going back to the year 2000, and then the schedule of when those are expected to be paid off. You know, this was a big question that came out of last year on, you know, what is the town debt? What does it look like? When is it gonna get paid off? So you can see that we're doing essentially a snapshot in time. You know, we do have to make some assumptions. If you go from, you know, the right side over towards the left, and you go in to the left where the fire apparatus band is, all of that has already been a yes, right? Everything over to the right, Berlin, Culvert, Wilder, that's all stuff for this year. You know, so again, we are assuming, you know, my thought was, let's assume it's a yes. Let's do our best to build out and provide information. What is it gonna be? How long is the band going to be? And what is the addition to the overall debt? But you can see that there was a big piece of it from 2006 to 2009, and there were some big numbers there, and those aren't going away anytime soon either. I mean, we're going out to the year 2029. Now, again, this is just a snapshot. This is right now. So assuming everything is a yes this year, and we have this, you know, nice little graph. I know this, it's hard for you guys to see, but you'll see it at the presentation at town meeting. It shows a downward sloping, so going down is always good, right? Like, hey, the debt is going away. Sure, that's great. It's also predicated on the fact that between now and the year 2029, nothing else goes on, which is very unlikely. All right? So that's where we are with the debt. All total, 20 million and change. And that translates into us, you know, in the neighborhood of 2 million a year, we are allocating towards taking care of that debt. Now the question is, well, what's gonna come on down the pipe? And, you know, we have a meeting every year with capital planning to get a sense of what it's gonna look like. I didn't make handouts, but you guys are welcome to take a look. I have capital planning projections from the past couple years. Right, we're dealing with FY17 right now. You can see on page 25, that's 1.3 million of potential projects we're looking at. When I look back at a capital planning projection from 2011, FY17 had 170,000. All right, now I am by no means throwing capital planning under the bus. The point here is a lot of things come up. You know, Harold has keenly made us all aware of the pillars at the town hall. But something comes up that is more important, so we've had to put those off. We've had to put them off. Well, now, there's no putting them off. Go up, take a look at them. There's holes in the bottom of them. So, we are doing our best to do a forward look and see what's happening, going on down the road. But it does change. So that's really kind of the state of the state, I guess, if you will. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Actually, Stan Wysocki, Selectman, I think you made reference to it, but I think on your second page of your handout, you had mentioned that, the overall, FY '17 expenses increased by $630,000, 2.9%, but I think the third bullet down, I think, is very telling, because the bulk of that increase is from the schools, Neshoba and
Yeah.
et cetera, which they are what they are, but
Yeah.
I think one thing, I think you should highlight, and I think we should all be proud of, is that, this year, the remainder of the town budget, the 38% of the budget that the town controls, we increased it by, $76,000,
Yeah.
which is less than 1%. And I think, that speaks volumes to what all of us have done over the last at least decade or so in terms of scrutinizing the budget each year and cutting back and making sure that the departments are spending only what they need to spend, which is also reflected in, the lowering amounts of free cash that get certified each year. Because in years past, we had $1.5 million, $2 million of free cash when all is said and done. And we're operating at a much finer line at the moment. So I think, it really should be stressed that, the advisory committee and the selectmen and everyone else involved are really doing a great job in terms of holding back the increases where we can and trying to provide the services we can on as little increased dollars as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Stan referenced free cash, and just to give you guys a sense, again, it's essentially the amount of money that was in excess from the previous year, right? So this year, certified free cash came in at 604, where the previous year we had 9 and change. So from an advisory standpoint, we're starting already with 300 less, right? So if free cash came in exactly the same, all right, I mean, another 300 grand, I don't know, I suppose we could have taken off the town hall repairs off of debt, and we could have said, oh, well, we'll do that with free cash, right? I mean, that's just to give you a sense of what do we have with the free cash and how can we utilize that first and foremost in this upcoming year before we have to go out and borrow. Just like you guys, when you're looking at your finances going, well, absolutely need to get the transmission fixed in the car. No doubt I would love the pool, but I need the transmission so I can get to work. Got $2 grand in the bank. You know what? I used 1,000 of that, and I'm gonna have to throw the other 1,500 onto the credit card. It's essentially what we're doing, trying to figure this out. Questions? Mr. Sagansky.
Snow and ice deficit. You've got the snow and ice budget where it's historically been at 180,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you dropped the tax reserve capacity to $75,000.
Yes.
Even though you have a history on this spreadsheet of exceeding, what would that be, 255? If I take 75 and add it to 180?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious about the thinking behind that.
Yeah, so, you're right, so the snow and ice, we generally keep that at 180. And that is, that was utilized, even though with this light winter, we did come up to that 180 amount. The 75, we took that, we normally keep 100 on the front. And we don't that is excess that we can go into. I would like to think that we're all done with the snow, but if we have any more, we would go into that. If that ultimately goes to 0, right, which is, again, it's excess that we can utilize. If we end up not having to utilize that, then the unused tax levy is simply gonna be going up, because we didn't end up having to use that.
Okay.
But it's also the same thing, we have in there warrant articles for borrowing. Again, in here, there's some assumptions that everyone is gonna say yes to the $1 million of borrowing. If everyone decides to say no, right, that $1,080,556 goes to a 0, and then we have over $1 million worth of unused tax levy.
Mhm. Well, no, not of tax levy. Because it's the payments that go against your tax levy, not the borrowings themselves. So what that would free up, if that $1,080,000 went away, the $140,000 that I was questioning before would be excess capacity.
But also within the Bob, you know the spreadsheet, right?
I've
know
spent
very
some time
well.
on this spreadsheet.
Yes, so you know when the $1,080,000 goes to 0, the unused tax levy at the very bottom will rise. And
Okay, yes.
in that particular case, it's gonna rise over $1 million.
Yes, okay, yes.
All right, so let's move to the school committee, and then we'll come back and you can ask questions about whatever. But let's ask Lorraine to walk you through the school budget.
Okay, so there's a quick PowerPoint. It looks like more pages than we'll typically take. But thank you very much for setting this up. Brad, thank you so much. Appreciate your help too. So I'm one of 2 Bolton School Committee reps. Our other rep is Neil Darcy. He's unfortunately traveling, so he couldn't be here. But I do want to introduce a few folks from the district who've come with me. First is Mark Jones. Mark Jones is a school committee rep from Stowe. He's also the chair of the finance committee for the school committee. Kathy Cote is in the audience. She is the chair of the personnel subcommittee and a rep on the school committee. So I've got them here in case we get specific questions that we need their help with. I've asked Dr. Bates, Dr. Kurt Bates, who is our interim superintendent, to come as well. And Dr. Bates, I appreciate you all being here. And Pat Maroney is our district accountant. So Pat has come to help me with some of the line item questions that I may get. Our budget is 80 pages. Right now, the budget is up on the district website if you go under the finance tab and you go into FY17, the budget is there. And one of the things I want to mention is we've done a lot of work this year on the budget. And this is our first year that we've put a budget book together, which includes a narrative on the front section of the book. I don't have books for everyone. It would cost a lot of money, and we're trying to contain copier expense. But there's a narrative for the major sections of the budget that I think will help put perspective around some of the various funds that we talk about, some of the revenue sources and the expenditures. So I want to make sure that that narrative is on the district website as well. Okay, so if you flip the page, I want to give you a quick historical perspective. I'm on this page, it says historical assessment, and I'll make sure this document is on the district website tomorrow for those who might be watching. So the reason I put this together is I want to give folks a level set here with where we're at. This year, we had 3 rounds of review in public session on the budget. The first round came to us from the assistant superintendent at the end of January. The budget was adopted on March 15th. That means we had a month and a half to get into the budget and do some work. Our goals this year were to preserve the programs, the important educational instructional programs that are currently in place, and to look for efficiencies in the budget. So the first round that we received the budget, it came in at a 7.53% assessment for Bolton. We did some work, we rearranged some things, we sunsetted some programs that we didn't think we needed anymore, and we sent it back, and we were presented with a 5.1% increase for Bolton. From there, it got a little trickier, because at that point now you really have to make some very difficult decisions. We have, and we'll show you what those are, we have preserved staff. I want to make sure everybody knows that. Teachers are going to remain in their positions, and I'll show you how we did a couple of things to ensure that. The Bolton assessment, this year it is 4.44%, but I want to make sure you understand that last year we were urged and asked, and we worked directly with the advisory and the selectmen to be responsive and try to reduce that assessment by leveraging additional money that is in our excess and deficiency account, which is the equivalent of the free cash on the municipal side. So we, as a committee, voted to take more of that cash and apply it to the budget. So we used $600,000 of that cash. We also used additional money that was sitting in a school choice account. We, at the time, said we would do it, and we understood, and we would respond, but it's a one-time thing. It's not consistent. We can't continually pull from our savings account and expect the money to be there every year. So I want to make sure people understand that. If we hadn't used that money last year, our assessment last year would have been at 4.67. So now we come fast forward to this year. We still have the expenses from last year, but we don't have that additional money to spend. So that's why our assessment is at the 4.44%, and we have taken some efficiencies, and I'll show you where those are at. So I just want to make sure folks understand why 4.44% and some of the reasoning behind that, okay? The next page is the budget overview. This year, our FY17 increase is 2.82% relative to last year. I'm going to ask Pat to take us through the detail on this page. So Pat, if you're...
If you look at the top of the page, it tells you that there's a voted budget of $54,126, and then there's a net budget with $3.8 million in grant and revolving offsets. So that brings us down to $50,319,249. The high school debt, which is the ongoing debt from the 2005 construction, I wasn't sure exactly what year, is backed out of that number first. Then we back out the local, state and locally generated revenue. That's the revenue, our Chapter 70 money, our E&D that we fund the budget with, any revolving revenue sources that we use. So that's what makes up the 8.9. The total amount assessed is the amount that's going to be assessed to each of the member communities. There's a fixed assessment portion. This portion is the portion of the budget that the state calculates the wealth of communities and determines what your share should be. So that's what the 24,855,989 is. It's called the minimum required local contribution, and it's state mandated. The variable assessment is the $15,895,000. This is based on, and this will be assessed to the member districts based on a 5-year rolling average per the regional agreement. As you can see, Bolton's assessment, the percentage for Bolton is 32.1%, and that would be applied to the fixed assessment, the variable assessment, and then the debt assessment has a different percentage application based on the number of students enrolled at the high school, because that is the only true building that we own. To give us a total assessment of $13,472,254. And then you can see the difference, the comparison of the difference from last year, bringing us to the 4.44% increase.
I want to make one quick comment on the FY17 net debt assessment. In last week's Bolton Independent, there's an article that speaks to debt that Brad and I worked on. And the numbers in there that are relative to the 2 bonds for the high school building, the 2005 renovation, and then the field, the Bolton assessment numbers were not accurate, and those numbers, the assistant superintendent provided the numbers, but he's since provided the corrected, updated numbers. So those are reflected in the budget that's online and in my document here. So the information you're looking at here is correct. Okay. So let's flip the page, and I kind of broke the budget out, Pat and I worked on this, between personnel and non-personnel expense. I think it's easier for you guys to understand, it's easier for me to understand. Personnel is salary, benefits, and insurance, so anything that takes care of our employees, and then the non-personnel is the other portion of the operating budget. And as you can see, that about 78% of the total budget is really personnel-related expenses. The remainder, the 22%, is non-personnel, so the operations of the school district, okay? If you flip the page, what I'm showing you here is the breakout by expense type. So what does that mean? Well, remember I just mentioned those personnel, those 3 components that make up that personnel bucket. The 1-year change in salaries for existing personnel is $1.5 million. What we did for salaries for new personnel is we eliminated positions that either hadn't been filled and we didn't need them on the books, or we got a little more efficient with some of the staffing that we currently have. So you'll see a reduction there. If you go down the list, there's a couple of items that clearly you had mentioned that you've got some negatives in your columns, and we have some in ours, and that reflects some of the work that we did to try to dig into some of these items. School choice and charter school, the number of students choicing out and going to charter schools has dropped, and that's why that number's down, and that's good, and we want to continue to see that trend. We've gotten tighter on our copier, postage, supplies, contracted services. We've gotten a little more efficient in the way we do that work, and our sped transportation dropped a little bit. I think one of the things I really want you to understand, and that's why these are in dotted red boxes, is that the salary increase this year is 1.5. But when you look at the complete expense table, the increase is 1.4. So how did we go from 1.5 to 1.4 million? And that's where the efficiencies come in. All right, so I'm gonna have you flip the page. We're not gonna spend much time on this next chart. It's 2 columns. And what I did here was I just want you to see the major areas, and this is as the state, these are some of the categories that the state reports out on. So we're starting to try to pull a lot of the work that we're doing with Dr. Bates's guidance into what is the state recommendation, what do they wanna see? We need to start to align ourselves more fully with what the state is looking for. So I'm giving you these buckets based on, you know, what was last year's total budget, 52 million, the increase in the total budget, which I mentioned to you is 2.82, and then this year's expense, which is 54 million. So I just wanna share with you, these are how it breaks out by major bucket, okay? So what did we do and where did the changes come and what are some of the initiatives? And that's the page that has the 4 green boxes on it. Okay. For staffing, we added a sped teacher. We had to add the sped teacher due to enrollment, okay? You have more kids, you need additional teachers to take care of those children. We had to add a English language learner teacher because our need has doubled in 2 years. So, and that's a state, is that?
Required under your coordinated program review, make sure you have a certified ELL teacher, delivering those services.
So that's one that we can't really change either. I'm sure that some of you have heard about the NEASC recommendations, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. They did a review of our high school. It was a 3-year-long study to renew our accreditation, and they came back and gave us some wonderful commendations for culture and what the teachers are doing. But there were a couple of things in there that they said would have put us on warning status if we don't fix them, and we have until September 1st of this year in order to fix those things, or October 1st of this year in order to fix those things. And one of those is allowing the principal to do the work of managing his building. So one of the advantages of having Dr. Bates come in is that he's been working and guiding him and allowing him to hire his own people and start to manage his own school. And one of those components is there are currently department heads in the high school, but the department heads don't really have a robust evaluative role. They're really not doing a supervisory role. Well, in order to give the schools autonomy, we need to allow them to manage their own people. So this increase in the department head role is really a response to NEASC to protect our accreditation. We are also reinstating 2 middle school instructional technology teachers. So about 4 or 5 years ago, and Kathy's here, so that's one of the advantages of having you.
Well, 2009.
2009. Okay, so in 2009, there was an economic downturn. There were some positions that were eliminated, and 2 of those positions were instructional technology teachers. What's happened since 2009 and 2016, digital learning has exploded. The state test is actually moving in that direction. You've got to be able to take what is now the MCAS. Eventually, everybody has to take it online. Last year, we started a Chromebook initiative. We outfitted our 8th graders with a Chromebook so that and every year we're gonna continue to do that. So eventually, all of the learning that takes place will have a strong digital component. It makes sense. It's where digital learning is going. So we need to reinstate those 2 teachers. Why would we give technology to students, expect the teachers to use more technology, but not have people there for them to use as a resource? So we reinstated those positions. Now, instead of having one person run from 3 towns every day, going to a different school to try to Band-Aid something, which means people are waiting, now we will have those instructional leaders in that school in order for the students and the teachers to have the resources that they need when they need them. I know you're all aware that we did reinstate a full-time Hale Middle School principal. Every other school in the district has a full-time principal. And the state, it was reported by the district that the principal of the Hale Middle School was 20% of a full-time executive. That school deserves its own principal, and the school committee made it a priority to reinstate a full-time principal in that middle school. We also increased our facilities administrative support from a half of a secretary admin to a full-time position, and I'll explain why in a second. We've offset that. So those are the staffing changes that we made. and I feel strongly that every one of these has a reason. There were additional requests that we had, and we did not take those additional requests because we had to prioritize. So where did we take the reductions? There's a couple of things. So we did reduce 2 teachers, but I wanna explain how that worked. We aren't eliminating teachers. Every year, the superintendent finds out in October the number of retirees.
They don't have to notify till after January.
January.
Okay, so we find out the number of folks in the district who are gonna retire, right? Say that's 10 people. So if we've got 10 people who are retiring, and yet we need more support in other areas, what that allows us to do is to not reduce our head count. We just don't fulfill all those positions, right? So if we don't have the enrollment to support 10 teachers, then we wouldn't hire the 10 teachers, we would only hire the 8 teachers. Does that make sense? So these 2 teachers that are being reduced are actual positions, not people. Does that help? Okay. 4 paraprofessionals, the 4 that's a tongue twister. That's due to enrollment too. That number may actually be dropping to 2 paraprofessionals. So if we don't have the need, instead of keeping people on the books, we're going to start to move that out. And then the custodial services manager position was a position that was added in 2014. And the custodial services manager position has been eliminated. That person has been returned to the school in a custodial supervisory role. But that money that we saved from that helped offset in part that facilities administrative support that you saw in the staffing bucket above, Bob.
What's a paraprofessional?
It's a non-certified person who will help, usually in special education, who supports the students and with the teachers.
So it's a teacher's aide in
It's another name
plain
for an
language?
aide.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
yeah, please do.
All right, any more questions before I, yes?
What is English language learning?
It's for children who have English as their second language. You have had a huge increase in your population here in your district. 2 years ago, you only had like mid-20s. Now you're up to close to 50 students. And by law, you're required to provide them with support in learning English and provide, all teachers now have to be certified in that area, and that's a process the state is requiring every district to go through.
Hi.
Thank you. So on the instructional people,
Yep.
there's a 3rd instructional technologist who will be located in Bolton and will service the Florence Sawyer and Emerson
Yes,
campuses.
yes,
Got it, okay.
yeah. And there was one more?
Yes, just going back to the earlier pages, budget net of grants, grants to $3 million, where does that come from? Where do those grants come from?
You wanna handle that, the grants, the chapters?
We have the, IDEA grant, which is the huge special ed grant, and that's over $800,000. Title I. And
Which
there are
is-
several,
Can you let them know what Title I is? I don't know that they know.
Title I is based on low income, usually free and reduced lunch. It's for students who need supports, usually in English, like reading, literacy, and or math. So that's a federal and state grant. And you have Title II, which is professional development money that the federal and state government give to districts to help. By law, you have to provide professional development, and so that's a grant that your district also receives.
Okay, thank you. I did have a couple of other questions. On the FY17 net debt assessment, you had mentioned that the only building that we own is the high school. Maybe I misunderstood that.
No, you didn't. The
Okay, so
only
what-
building the district owns is the high school because it's regional under the regional agreement, but the town owns the Sawyer School and the Emerson School.
Okay, I didn't know that, thank you. This is
Sure.
new to me, so I would appreciate
No, no,
answering the
great.
question. I just have a couple of others, some of the other pages. On breakout by expense type, insurance and benefits. So what kind of insurance does that, figure cover?
Pat, you have that one?
I'm just looking at it, because we have salaries of 34 million and benefits of about 7 million, so I'm just curious what kind of insurance is provided.
That would be the health insurance. I'm just looking on this sheet here. It would be, the workers' comp, health insurance for active and retirees, and that would be dental as well, property and casualty insurance, and retirement.
And what kind of medical plan is that?
It's Blue Cross Blue Shield, and it's, managed by Maya.
Okay. Thank you. And then I just had a last question. So 8th grade Chromebook initiative, so that's to purchase Chromebook devices for every 8th grader?
So that's a great segue into, I'll explain that. So is that, did you have another one before I go into that?
No, that was the last question.
Okay.
I was just curious because I know a lot of companies do a BYOD, a bring your own device plan, but so maybe you can explain the Chromebook.
Yes, I can do that. We do have, about 3 years ago, the school committee adopted a BYO, a Bring Your Own Device initiative. I'm not necessarily sure I want to answer this part. You might be able to help me with it. But I think that if everybody's not on the same device, and some kids don't have a device, it doesn't allow us to utilize the system. I'm not gonna be able to say the right words, but, cause I'm not a tech person, but it's not gonna allow us to use the same platform, and you would be able to answer this.
Yeah, I can just make a comment. I mean, the biggest thing is if you think about, you know, if you look at a Mac versus a PC, think about the teacher trying to tell, you know, the students how to do the same thing on 2 or 3 different platforms. So by having all the students on the Chromebook, there's one set of instructions. The school can keep some spares so that if one breaks or is lost or misplaced or left at home or whatever, the students have access to a replacement. Let's see what other benefits are there. Lets the school standardize on certain package software so that that's then consistent across all of, across all of the different students.
And definitely, I mean, I think, especially children that can't afford to purchase these, it's certainly important to have this available on a, I'm thinking on a needs basis, but I'm just.
But you know what, we're actually, you bring something, and I'm not gonna commit to it because we're just starting to look into it, but one of the things that the school committee is actually talking about is there a way for us to create a program, and then we invite folks to purchase their own Chromebooks for their kids. So we're looking at a couple of different things, but we are looking at it because this is not an expense that's gonna go away.
Right, and a lot of families, their children have, iPad, whatever, they probably already have Chromebooks or similar devices, and I'm thinking, why have 2? A lot of families do already have those. Again, other than those that there may be a need, we certainly want to be able to provide those.
Exactly, right. So that's what we're doing. So this is the 2nd year of the Chromebook initiative. We started last year by outfitting all of the 8th grade students with a Chromebook that they're taking to the high school with them next year. And the 8th graders this year received a Chromebook, and each year that we provide Chromebooks to the students, it's $30,000. So last year it was $30,000, this year we've doubled that, it's $60,000, next year it'll be $90,000, and then we go into a rotating schedule. I think that's why the school committee is looking at, is there another way for us to do this? Can we get a little more creative? We looked at some of the other districts around, not necessarily around us, but in Burlington, they did a pretty cool program too, where parents were invited to purchase the Chromebooks. And I know myself, I would purchase my own Chromebook for my child, and that would help reduce the cost of the budget.
I mean, when my kids went to college, they'd be outfitted with their laptops and
Right.
devices, so. Yeah.
Right, and the reality is that, you know, it's like, you know, you gotta find that balance of the digital component with the human component, but the reality is that everything is moving digitally and our kids need to be there. Okay, the other initiative is we currently have a safety resource officer in the schools that's a part-time, officer. And we believe it's important to have a full-time officer in the school. So we actually worked with the town administrator, who was wonderful, and school is in session for 180 days. So we are covering the full cost of salary plus benefits for the number of days that this school resource officer is in the high school. And then OPEB funding, so that's, oh, Bob, yes. Oh, Bob.
So this is actually directed back towards Bolton officials. So it sounds like the only out-of-pocket cost for the SRO to Bolton, since we're being reimbursed for salary and benefits, is the cruiser and gasoline and stuff like that. Is that a fair statement?
In support of the SRO?
Yes.
Well, we have to hire another police officer to take up the slot that's been opened by dedicating the officer to full-time, so no, that's not true.
All right, so, and Bolton will also be on the hook for retirement kinds of benefits.
Any town employee, yes.
Yes, but basically the school district is paying for the current expenses. Bolton has to put money aside for the future expenses.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Retiree health insurance, OPEB. Our liability is great here, and every year the accountants or the auditors tell us we need to start funding. So 2 years ago, a couple of us felt very strongly about that, and we put about $150,000, we encumbered that in an account. Last year, unfortunately, the school committee decided not to do anything, and I think that this year, we were being extremely conservative, but I think the committee feels strongly that while it's only $25,000, it is an indicator that we are going to make a commitment, and it is our intent to do so going forward year over year, because right now we are in a pay-as-you-go program, so we pay every year for our retirees, but we're not building up the savings account in order to help offset the cost, and it's not, healthcare costs aren't going down and people are living longer. So those are the initiatives that we've undertaken. For offsets and efficiencies, these are just a few of them, but I think they're important, and I want you to understand the work that the school committee has done to dig into the budget. That $122, or $122,000, are salaries from retirement to reinstate the 2 middle school IT people I mentioned in the staffing bucket. So those 2 new teachers is actually coming out of money that was in the budget. And let me explain how this works. So remember I mentioned to you we've got a certain number of retirees every year? What we've learned is that each year, so when a retiree leaves, someone retires, they're at the top of the pay scale. When you hire someone in, you're not gonna hire back at the top of the pay scale, right? You're gonna hire at a little bit lower. You're gonna get someone in who's got a few years, and I think we made a decision this year to look at rehiring at Masters Plus 5, which is much lower than what the top of the pay scale would be. What we found when we looked in the budget is that each year, the fully loaded cost was in there. So that's additional money that we can use to offset some of the additional staffing that we need. And then going forward, we'll be looking at making sure that the cost that we reestablish that staffing need at is not the fully loaded cost. It's at that lower cost of someone who's got much less experience. Because we don't need to hire people at that highest level. Does that make sense? Okay. I mentioned to you that we removed the custodial services manager position, not the individual, but the position. that, the duties of that position will be, some of it will be returned to the high school, to the schools and the managers and the custodial managers in the schools to start to do their own work. And then the reason that we increased that facilities administrative assistant is because that person can now start to order the supplies and help with scheduling. So we were able to save $50,000, which we returned to the budget. And then the $25,000 from the custodial revolving account is money that we are using to offset the cost of maintaining the fields. The new fields, we have to be maintained every year. So we're using some of the money that's in a revolving account, instead of saving it, we're actually using it. Okay, and now I'm almost done. The last page is on school committee priorities. This is what we know is happening this year, so I want you all to be aware of it. We will have a new superintendent, and that person will hopefully start July 1st. I don't know who it is yet, but just to give you a quick update, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we're doing on-site visits with our 3 finalists. We expect to meet on May 5th and make a decision at that point. So we will orient a new superintendent. We had commissioned the Mass Association of School Business Officials. They have come in, they did interviews, they looked at our operational structure, they looked at how we were doing things and could we find efficiencies somewhere, are we doing things efficiently? And we're waiting on that report to come back, but that report should be back within the next couple of weeks.
We're talking on Wednesday, so.
Oh,
it should be
wonderful.
soon.
And the whole school committee is really interested in hearing where we can find some additional efficiencies. I'm sure they're gonna come back and say we're doing some things great, but there's things that we could do better. We also need to make sure that accreditation at the high school is preserved. So there's additional work that's being done there, and the principal at the high school has created a committee of parents, teachers, school committee member, to work through that. We are in the last of 2 3-year contracts with our teachers and our non-teaching staff like the custodians. And I think it's important, I didn't put these in the slides, it's important for you to know that the Unit A contract, which is the largest contract, this year the increases for the teachers was 2.5%. Okay? So when you look at that, on top of where we came in, we really have tried to take a haircut in many areas. That's gotta be renegotiated. The Unit C contract has to be renegotiated. We need to renegotiate a new bus contract. We are negotiating high school department head positions right now. That work will be done in tandem with the union as well. We have to address the high school space needs. I can't tell you what that's gonna mean to the physical building, but I can tell you what that will mean to the community is that we are gonna be taking the message out into the community. We're gonna be holding tours of the school. We want you to understand what the situation of the school is. There's some amazing work that was done with the Space Needs Task Force, and we're gonna start to share that with all of you in a much more controlled way rather than quickly try to push something through. And then another big effort, I just left a meeting tonight with Dr. Bates and Kathy Cote, and we are looking at all non-union contracts. So any administrator that currently is in the district, we are looking at making those contracts more consistent and equitable, and looking at some legacy issues and expense that were in those contracts and pulling that out. And that's it.
Right, questions? Joe?
Hi, I have a question for you about the OPEB. I'm a little bit shocked that 25, I don't know what percentage is $25,000?
It doesn't even hit a full percentage, but if we put more in,
Right, no, I understand.
then that drives us up. I
But-
do have that number. Our liability for FY17
Yes.
is 1.4 million.
Okay.
So it's a drop in the bucket, but again, that's
But at
not,
least it's something, I know, I
it's an
understand.
indicator, right? We need to have an approach, we need to build an approach.
And if I may, Sasha, I will get to, if I may add on, I mean, what you heard from Lorraine, was exactly what she and I, school committee advisory thinks. I mean, when we look at this budget, so much of it is in a contract by way of employee benefits, salary, compensation. And you can take the sense of, well, we just need to find a way to lower those contracts. Sure, right? But then who do we have as employees to actually do the work, right? So there is a fine line on what goes on, but when we start these budget, cycles here, so much of it is already in a contract, and you just take that number and you move it forward, and then so what we're really working on really does translate into a relatively small amount. And we know that the contract increases, and it's a retirement, it's not a retirement plan that you and I are used to, where money out of our pocket into a 401k plan, and you've heard these terms OPEB. These are things, we have these employees now, and we have them forever. So it is something that continually grows. Lorraine's right, health insurance isn't going away, it's only going up. So if that component is going up and or contractually is going up, and we're trying to hold the line on other areas, what's it translate into? Something has to get cut, or we're all okay with taxes going up. Stasha?
I'm gonna ask the another question. What's the actual total liability for the district?
You have it. Hold on. $54.6 million. And you're right, $25,000 doesn't even hit 1%. It's, it's a
It's a line
start.
item, right? Doesn't it have a line?
Do we have a line item?
This is the first year with the line item.
This is the first year of the line item, so we're working on it. I think there was another question in the back. No? You all set? Is that it?
Any other questions for Brad? Nothing for Harold?
Your speech?
I guess people are saving that for town meeting.
Oh, dear.
No, don't save it for town
No.
meeting. Share it now.
All right, well, if we don't have any other,
I do have a question.
okay, go ahead.
When I was working on the 117 committee to submit a report to the selectmen, there was a gentleman on that committee that had been a member of the capital campaign.
Capital planning committee?
Capital planning.
Yep.
He said he'd been on it for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And that from the beginning, he was told that they didn't need to do it 117 because the state was going to take it over. And he wasn't sure how many years that
Mhm.
thought had been there, or that idea had been part of the committee. And I'm just wondering, when was the capital campaign told, or was it implied to them that the state was gonna take over 117, because it was many years before the issue came up last year? And who was it that told the capital campaign committee that 117 was an issue? And I guess my biggest concern is, going back that far,
Mm-hmm.
we in theory could be on our second or third TIPS grant, but we never applied for one, because the assumption is that the state would take over 117. And this was many years before the whole approval last year.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, what's the history?
Oh, I can't speak to the history of this, but, what I can say is what I explained to you before. I mean, there's an assessment, every single year, the department heads get together to make a determination on where the money needs to be spent. No doubt, I mean, I'll leave, Harold's here, I'll leave it to him to speak, but no doubt the town spent money on 117. He can speak a hell of a lot more eloquently than I.
Probably not.
Well, probably not eloquent.
I'll actually answer that for you. I've been here since March 2009, and no such message ever came from my office nor from the Board of Selectmen, so it would have been before March 2009. I don't know what year the Capital Planning Committee was formed, I think it was '06 or '07. But in the past 7 years, that's not been a message from the Selectmen.
Harold, did you ever perform and do work, your tour duty here in Bolton, did you ever perform work on 117? Yeah. Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
Did you bring that file?
I have never heard any time, I've been here, ever since dinosaurs crawl around the world, the state taking 117.
Mr. Sagansky.
You know, from my time in advisory, I never heard that either, and that goes back to '08 or something like that. And I would like to point out that a few years ago, Harold used Chapter 90 money to pave the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right, that, whatever message that individual had is incorrect. I mean, since the early 50s, the town has had, or actually since the road's been a road, the town has had responsibility. Under no circumstances or ever an indication we didn't have to worry about it as a state. That conversation started approximately 2 to 3 years ago. Potential of the state taking it over, and primarily just taking it over from the standpoint of vehicles, primarily vehicles, and nothing else. But prior to that, no, I mean, we've always had responsibility for maintaining it, plowing it, resurfacing it, and now, in the near, not the near distant future, repairing culverts.
So that, I mean, that's it, that, you know, there's been a few comments made this evening directed towards Harold and culverts, and, you know, we talked about culverts, they're here, we've got a couple more this year. We took care of some last year, and the year before, and the years that Bob was on, and he'll be on next year probably. But yeah, that's a concern, no doubt. When you have a road like Sampson Road, dinky little one-lane road, where the culvert is, you know, repaired at $250,000, and if there's a culvert that needs to be repaired on 117, it's gonna be significantly more than $250,000. And that's what we're running at. I mean, we've got 2 culverts on the docket this year. Berlin Road, 268, Wilder Road, 186. Now, I don't know the difference on why one costs more than the other. If I remember correctly, Berlin Road's got a whole mess of water. But again, they're little roads, right? 117 is a major thoroughfare. So if we need culverts, I don't know how many they are. It'll probably be a big number. Yes, ma'am.
I came in late and I did miss the culvert discussion.
Yeah.
So I have a question related to that. So how, I see the numbers in the town warrant and you just named, how do we arrive at those numbers? What's the bid process? Do we get bids from multiple vendors? And I just don't understand that process. Can you explain that?
Harold, do you wanna take a first run at that one?
I'll take the first run at that. Those figures came from, construction estimator, that estimated what those culverts were going to cost. We can't go out to bid until we have the money, we know we have the money on hand. Then we can put the bid package together and then we can go out. I've never heard of bidding before you have all the money. And that's one of the things you have to guarantee that you have these funds up. But these estimates were given to me, I worked on, but there was a professional estimator that gave us those figures.
Dasha.
I wanted to say this from the beginning, while we're on contentious issues. Free cash, very happy to see free cash at 325.
I thought you would be.
But I think it's worth pointing out, and I hope you pointed out at town meeting, that the fact that it came in at 604, and the DOR recommends 3 to 5%, right? And it is, which with the current budget puts 3% is $670,000. So well below 3%. And, that's something to keep in mind for next year, but anybody who wants to say that free cash number isn't right now, I would suggest you defer.
Yeah. with not talking about free cash. And, you know, it's there, it's 325, that's the number.
And you're
Sure.
not getting any more, Andy.
Yeah.
We're all set.
No bargaining up here.
No more.
All right, any other questions? All right, well,
Thank you
thanks.
for doing this.
Thanks, everybody, for this. I hope people who are watching it on TV will watch the reruns. I want to remind everybody that town meeting is next Monday night, May 2nd, 7 PM in the auditorium at the high school. I think there's a fair chance that this is going to be a 2-night town meeting, given the number of warrant articles we have and the depth of those. So everybody should clear Tuesday night too, so that we don't have to send Bupper out to get a quorum. 'Cause so 7 o'clock, Monday, May 2nd, town meeting, and hope to see everybody there. And thanks all for coming.
Richard,
Ma'am?
any